false as well, Paul, correct?
The reality is the cost of the financial crisis has outweighed, I don't know the exact statistic, but decades worth of tax. So it actually didn't solve the problem. Let me just say something, okay? The way the corporate system works is so corrupt that there is now absolutely clear evidence that the people who end up at the top of the boardrooms have 3 times the psychopathic attribute of the standard individual in society. In other words, we put people in charge of large, societally important organizations, whether they be food companies, supermarkets, financial sector organizations, banks, or what have you. Look at the nicknames, right? You've got the Gorilla, that was Dick Fuld of Lehman Brothers. The Knife was the nickname of the chief executive of Morgan Stanley. Alf was the nickname of the chief executive of Credit Suisse. That stands for arrogant little f***er. I don't know whether you had to put that on your program. The system is rotten. There is something rotten in the state of Denmark, and there's quite a few things we need to do. But we can't do them because the vested interest is run by the people with money. So we're in a bloody muddle.
Paul Moore, let's talk about the intersection between food prices, financial fraud, and psychopaths. And I want to talk about Barclays Bank for a second. They were caught rigging LIBOR. They've been caught involved in a number of financial scandals. They recently came out and said that they're going to step away from speculating in the agricultural commodities business, as are a few other banks, because now it's become clear that the psychopathic banker that you describe, which is endemic in the system, goes out there and they drive the price of food up to astronomical highs, even though it means poverty, widespread poverty, or triggering a revolution, as we saw in Egypt. So here you have an intersection between agricultural speculation, the food chain and the food costs, and psychopathic bankers. They all seem to come together in the agriculture business, Paul.
Well, they come together in all businesses. The love of money is the root of all evil, always has been. And yes, I think there's increasing evidence of manipulation of the agricultural commodity markets. I think there's increasing evidence of manipulation of the oil markets. It doesn't really matter what you're operating in. What we need to do is we need to recognize that company law, that's the way these big companies work, and the duties that directors have, was not designed for companies with balance sheets the size of sovereign governments and more power than most of them. We need, for big companies, to make sure that directors' duties include public duties because they have such big societal impact. We need to do a whole range of other things, but that's the heart of the thing. By the way, Adam Smith, when he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he was very strong on the idea of conscience being part of a free capitalist world, and they talk about him as if he sort of said, oh, you can do anything you like. The truth of the matter is the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And therefore, you do need to have constraints on human nature where if money is the sole measure of everything, we end up exploiting others as we satisfy our own greed, destroying our planet by over-consuming, and also actually destroying what life's about. What is life about?
Well, let's ask Mark Carney, who's the incoming Bank of England governor, this important question, because George Soros has come out and said that the UK pound, along with the Japanese yen, are incredibly overvalued. He points to the UK having debt to GDP, inclusive of private debt and household debt and government debt, of close to 900% debt to GDP. The pound is under attack. And Mark Carney is being parachuted in, presumably, to what they say change the definition of inflation or to raise the inflation expectation. So the meaning of life for Mark Carney, apparently coming in, is to get that money flowing even more spectacularly as it is now, which would degrade life in the UK to a greater degree. Isn't Mark Carney the poster child for a banking psychopath?
Whether he's got a job that is doable, I very much doubt. And the whole system is set. I mean, how on earth are we going to repay this debt? I've got no idea.
Okay, let's move on to a couple of solutions that you mentioned, or things that should be looked at more closely. One, of course, is prop trading or proprietary trading. Give us a 20-second definition of prop trading and then why you think it should be banned.
Proprietary trading is a manipulation of the markets through a dominant position in information, often generated through conflicts of interest, a dominant position in mathematics, and a dominant position in computer science. Ordinary people can't deal in the marketplace in any sensible way in competition with proprietary traders. Proprietary trading is not banking. It's got nothing to do with banking. It shouldn't be allowed.
And going back to Adam Smith, in his day, of course, if he were able to write about proprietary trading, he would point out that it's a complete violation of all the basic tenets of capitalism, and he would outlaw it or suggest it be outlawed instantaneously. Paul Moore, additionally, you're talking about full reserve banking. Of course, this would imply that instead of a 10% or less reserve and loans being kind of made out to this level where the central banks end up with less than 2% equity to the loans outstanding, for example. Full reserve, of course, would reverse that. Talk a little bit about it.
Well, obviously, 97% of the money supply is created through the creation of credit by ordinary commercial banks. So 97% of our money is debt. Now, full reserve banking creates a completely new way of doing things. Your current account, right, they can't lend money in your current account, so there can never be a run on a bank. Any other money that you want to save, you make the decision as to what level of risk you want to take with that money. So you might want high-risk loans, medium-risk loans, or low-risk loans. It's a brand new way of thinking about things. It removes the level of encouragement to debt in society, and it will have a major impact. It's also, along with peer-to-peer lending, which is another way of getting rid of the way banks issue credit in order to make money for themselves.
Right, peer-to-peer lending, very active here in the UK and elsewhere as a way to do an end run around the entrenched oligopoly that is the banking system. But Paul Moore, you've been in the banking sector, you've been a regulator. You know quite well that it's almost impossible for people to start new banks in the UK. Wouldn't it be easy if George Osborne and David Cameron were truly interested in getting some economic growth in the UK? Wouldn't the first order of business be allowing for 5 or 10 new banks to be created to compete with the 4 major entrenched oligopolists that have destroyed this country and are destroying this country, Paul?
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. But I think encouraging and looking thoroughly into full reserve banking and looking thoroughly and supporting peer-to-peer lending will break that oligopoly that you refer to of these huge banks that have not demonstrated their... I mean, look at Barclays. What did they do? They got themselves into trouble, so they recruited Sir David Walker, a city mandarin, a very nice guy, to be the chairman. They then recruited Hector Sants, the ex-regulator, to be their head of global compliance and pay him £3 million a year. Goodness gracious me, you've got a failed regulator, a failed guy who's in charge of corporate governance, and now Anthony Jenkins says they're going to do all sorts of things completely different. Will anybody really believe them? I would like, personally, to be going in there and having a really good rummage around and check that they're actually doing what they're saying, because until somebody independent goes in, nobody will believe them.
Right. Hector Sants, the new compliance guy at Barclays, he's the guy you bribe the most. I remember from my days on Wall Street, it's the compliance guy who gets the biggest Christmas bribe every year. Anyway, Paul Moore, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Cheers.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Paul R. Moore, the H-Boss whistleblower. If you'd like to contact us, you can email us at keiserreport@rttv.ru or tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.